The harsh glare of the film set lights reflected in the polished surface of the mahogany table, a centerpiece in the opulent, faux Victorian dining room they were using for the scene. Yu Yanqing felt a strange disconnect, the heavy period costume clinging to her like a second skin, itchy and suffocating. She ran a hand over the embroidered bodice, the movement stiff and unnatural. Across the table, Shen Wenxian, her husband, sat perfectly composed, his character's aloofness mirroring his own. He raised an eyebrow, a subtle signal for her to begin. She swallowed, the lump in her throat constricting her breath. This is just a play, she told herself, just lines, just a role. Yet, the words wouldn't come. The scene called for intimacy, a shared glance heavy with unspoken emotion. But looking at him, all she felt was a cold hollowness. Cut. Director Li's voice boomed across the set, breaking the strained silence. Yanqing, what's the matter? We've been over this scene 3 times already. Her heart pounded against her ribs, a trapped bird desperate for escape. She forced a smile, a brittle, fragile thing. Sorry, Director Li. Just lost my concentration for a moment. She risked a glance at Shen Wenxian. He remained impassive, his eyes cool and observant. He knows, she thought, a flicker of fear igniting in her chest. He knows I'm not acting. This doesn't count, she muttered, her voice barely audible. Shen Wenxian's gaze sharpened, a glint of steel in its depths. What doesn't count? This scene, she said, a tremor in her voice. The kidnapped girl tried to escape. Seducing the kidnapper. A muscle twitched in his jaw, a subtle sign of his displeasure. Yanqing, this is a professional setting. We don't have time for these lapses. But you are my wife, Shen Wenxian. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken accusations. The silence that followed was thick with tension, the crew members shifting uncomfortably, pretending not to listen. Didn't you say you don't have any sense of propriety in this play? His voice was low, dangerously smooth. That's different. She looked away, unable to meet his gaze. How could he be so calm? She wondered. Didn't he understand the irony, the cruel twist of fate that had her playing a captive, while in reality, she felt equally trapped? Different how? He pressed, his voice laced with a hint of steel. She wanted to scream, to tear at the elaborate costume, to rip off the mask of composure she'd worn for so long. This play she stammered, the words catching in her throat. Anti-Stockholm Syndrome, Shen Wenxian finished for her, his voice flat and emotionless. I thought you read the script. The blood drained from her face, leaving her feeling cold and hollow. He had known all along. This entire production, her discomfort, his insistence on her taking the role, it had all been a carefully orchestrated performance. A twisted game he was playing, using her own life as a prop. Later that evening, the glittering chandeliers of the grand ballroom cast a shimmering light on the assembled guests. The charity gala was in full swing, a sea of designer gowns and tailored suits. Yu Yanqing stood beside Shen Wenxian, her smile fixed in place, a perfect porcelain doll. She felt his hand on her back, a possessive gesture that sent a shiver down her spine. He's watching me, she thought, always watching. The kidnapping incident, just a week prior, hung over her like a shroud. The police had dismissed it as a random act, a botched robbery attempt. But Yu Yanqing knew better. The kidnapper, a young woman with strangely familiar eyes, had barely touched her, her focus seemingly elsewhere. The whole ordeal felt staged, a bizarre theatrical production with a script she couldn't decipher. You seem distracted, Yanqing. Shen Wenxian's voice was low, close to her ear. Just tired, she murmured, her gaze drifting across the room. He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that sent a chill down her spine. The after effects of your ordeal, no doubt. She met his gaze, a flicker of defiance in her eyes. He thinks he's won, she thought, but he's wrong. Mother called earlier, she said, her voice deliberately casual. She needs more money. His jaw tightened, the only outward sign of his displeasure. I've already given her a substantial sum. It wasn't enough, she replied, her voice laced with a hint of malice. She has debts. He knew what that meant. Her mother, a faded actress with a crippling gambling addiction, had used Yu Yanqing as collateral for her latest venture. It was a familiar pattern, a cycle of manipulation and desperation that had defined their relationship for years. I'll handle it, he said, his voice tight. Of course you will, she replied, her smile widening, a predatory gleam in her eyes. This is my game now, she thought, and he's playing right into my hands. As the night wore on, Yu Yanqing moved through the crowd, a graceful phantom in her shimmering gown. She exchanged pleasantries with dignitaries and socialites, her every move calculated, every word carefully chosen. She was playing a part, just as she always had. But tonight, the script was different. Tonight, she was in control. Across the room, Shen Wenxian watched her, his expression unreadable. He felt a prickle of unease, a sense of something shifting beneath the surface. He had always underestimated her, dismissed her as a fragile, easily manipulated pawn in his game. But now, he saw a glint of steel in her eyes, a hint of something dangerous lurking beneath the surface. She's changed, he realized, a cold knot of apprehension tightening in his chest. The kidnapping, it did something to her. He had orchestrated the event, a calculated move to garner sympathy, to bolster his public image. But he had miscalculated. He hadn't accounted for the unpredictable nature of fear, the way it could twist and distort, transforming the victim into something else. Something he no longer recognized. And as he watched her, a chilling thought took root in his mind. He had created a monster. And now, he had to control her. The artificial sunlight of the film set glared down, harsh and unforgiving. Yu Yanqing stood frozen, the script clutched in her hand, the words blurring into meaningless symbols. Director Li's voice, usually a booming presence, now seemed a distant hum. Her mind raced, a chaotic symphony of resentment and fear. He found it. The divorce agreement, tucked away so carefully, a desperate lifeline she hadn't dared to use, was now a weapon in his arsenal. He held her future, her career, in the palm of his hand, and the weight of it threatened to suffocate her. Shen Wenxian stood just outside the periphery of the set, his posture rigid, his expression controlled. The practiced calm he maintained in public was a thin veneer over the storm brewing within. This woman, his wife, the actress Yu Yanqing, was becoming a liability. The recent kidnapping, the whispers in political circles, it was all too much. He had underestimated her capacity for disruption. His gaze flickered to the script in her hand, the very source of their current argument. A play about a woman trapped in a loveless, controlling marriage. How ironic. Yanqing, he called, his voice low and measured, each syllable precise. The set fell silent, the crew holding their breath, sensing the tension crackling in the air. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting his. The mask she wore for the public, the bright, captivating smile, was gone, replaced by a chilling emptiness. What do you want, Secretary General? The formal address, delivered with icy precision, hung in the air like a challenge. He took a step closer, his shadow falling over her. We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about, she retorted, her voice tight. I've already told you, I won't do this scene. The script in her hand crinkled as her fingers tightened around it. Push away. Push away. The director's words from earlier echoed in her mind, a cruel reminder of the parallels between her stage life and her real one. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. This is not the time for your dramatics, Yanqing, he hissed, his control slipping for a fraction of a second. He glanced around, acutely aware of the prying eyes of the crew. "This film, your career, it's all under my protection. Don't forget that." The word struck her like a physical blow. Protection? It felt more like a gilded cage. Protection, she repeated, her voice rising, laced with a brittle laugh. Or control? He stiffened, his jaw clenching. "This is about the kidnapping, Yenqing. About my reputation. Do you understand the implications if this gets out? If they connect it to you? To us?" Her heart twisted. So, it wasn't about her safety, her trauma. It was about him. Always about him. He doesn't care. The realization, though not unexpected, sent a fresh wave of coldness through her. "You promised me," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "as long as I hide our relationship, it does not affect your reputation as Secretary General. I can continue acting." "Things have changed," he cut her off, his voice hard. "This play, it's too close to the truth. People will talk. They will connect the dots." He paused, his gaze intense. "And I found the divorce agreement." The air thickened between them, heavy with unspoken accusations and resentments. The divorce agreement. Her escape route. Now a bargaining chip. She swallowed hard, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. "He's going to use it against me. You can't control every aspect of my life, Shen Wenxian," she whispered, her voice barely audible. A flicker of something akin to amusement crossed his face. "Can't I?" he challenged, his tone dangerously soft. "I've managed it quite well so far, haven't I?" The crew shifted uncomfortably, the silence broken only by the hum of the lighting equipment. Director Li coughed nervously, glancing between the two. Assistant Wang hovered nearby, his face pale, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. Yu Yenqing closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her composure. She had played this game for too long, pretending to be the dutiful wife, the grateful actress. But something had shifted inside her during those terrifying hours in captivity. The fear, the isolation, had stripped away the last vestiges of her illusions. "I won't let him win." Opening her eyes, she met his gaze head-on. "You may control my career, my public image," she said, her voice regaining its strength, "but you will never control me." The words hung in the air, a declaration of war. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The subtle shift in her demeanor, the steel in her eyes, did not escape him. He had underestimated her, perhaps. But he was a master of strategy, of manipulation. He would find a way. "We'll see about that," he murmured, a hint of menace in his voice. He turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone under the harsh glare of the artificial sun, the script still clutched in her hand, a symbol of the battle yet to come. The charity gala that evening, he knew, would be the perfect stage for the next act. The harsh glare of the film set lights reflected off the glittering diamond on Yu Yenqing's finger, a stark contrast to the muted grays of her character's costume. She traced the cool facets of the stone, a familiar gesture that grounded her amidst the swirling uncertainty of her emotions. Director Li's voice, sharp and edged with impatience, sliced through the artificial world they'd constructed. "Yu Yenqing, what's in your hand? Why are you still wearing a diamond ring?" Her hand instinctively curled inwards, shielding the ring from his gaze. He doesn't understand, she thought, the words forming a bitter taste in her mouth. He doesn't understand what this ring represents, the gilded cage it symbolizes. Outwardly, her face remained impassive, a mask she'd perfected over years of navigating the treacherous currents of her double life. "I wear this ring because I know someone is quite important," she replied, her voice carefully modulated, each word weighted with a meaning that went beyond the simple statement. It was a performance within a performance, a subtle jab aimed at the absent architect of her gilded prison. Director Lee sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. He was a man wrestling with the chaos of a delayed production, and her quiet defiance was just another snag in the tangled fabric of his day. Can you please be professional? He wasn't interested in her personal dramas, only in capturing the scene before the light shifted and the budget hemorrhaged further. This is the third take we've ruined because of that ring. It doesn't fit the character. It breaks the illusion. Around them, the set hummed with suppressed impatience. Crew members shifted their weight, the rustling of their movements a subtle soundtrack to the simmering tension. Yu Yanqing could feel their eyes on her, assessing, judging. They think I'm being difficult, she thought, a flicker of resentment flaring within her. They see the actress, the diva, but they don't see the woman trapped behind the role. The ring, a gift from Shen Wenxian, was more than just a piece of jewelry. It was a constant reminder of her invisible chains, a symbol of the bargain she'd struck, security and status in exchange for her freedom. Director Lee, she began, her voice softening, injecting a note of conciliatory sweetness, I understand your concern. But this ringgit helps me access the character's emotions. It's a touchstone, a reminder of her vulnerabilities. It was a lie, of course, a carefully constructed fabrication. But it served its purpose. It shifted the focus from her disobedience to the intricacies of her craft, a territory where she reigned supreme. Director Lee hesitated, his gaze searching hers. He was a pragmatic man, more concerned with results than motivations. Fine, he conceded, waving a weary hand. But keep it subtle. I don't want it distracting from the scene. He turned away, barking orders at the lighting crew, the crisis momentarily averted. Yu Yanqing allowed herself a small, inward sigh of relief. The reprieve, however, was fleeting. The weight of her situation, the suffocating secrecy of her marriage, pressed down on her with renewed force. She thought of the recent kidnapping, the terror that had gripped her, the chilling realization that her carefully constructed world was far more fragile than she believed. Was it truly random? She wondered, a sliver of doubt creeping into her mind. The kidnapper, Qiao Qiao, a name that now resonated with a sinister undercurrent. There was something more to it, something she couldn't quite grasp. Later that evening, the opulent ballroom of the charity gala shimmered with a sea of designer gowns and flashing cameras. The air buzzed with polite conversation and the clinking of champagne flutes. Yu Yanqing, now adorned in a flowing crimson gown, moved through the crowd with practiced grace, her smile a flawless mask. Shen Wenxian stood beside her, his hand resting possessively on her waist, his every gesture radiating power and control. You were magnificent tonight, Yanqing, he murmured, his voice low and intimate, only for her ears. Everyone was captivated. She met his gaze, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Captivated by the performance, she thought, not by the woman behind it. Thank you, she replied, her voice smooth and emotionless. It's my job to captivate. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her entire life was a performance, a carefully crafted illusion designed to protect Shen Wenxian's image, to maintain the delicate balance of their secret marriage. He needed her to be the perfect actress, the adoring wife, the untarnished jewel in his political crown. And she, in turn, had learned to manipulate that need, to subtly twist the strings of their arrangement to her advantage. Her mother's gambling debts were a constant drain on her resources, a gnawing reminder of the precariousness of her position. Shen Wenxian, of course, knew nothing of this. He would never approve. He saw her as a symbol of purity, untouched by the sordid realities of her family's past. And so, she played the role he expected, while secretly orchestrating her own survival. Across the room, she saw her mother, her face flushed, her eyes bright with a feverish excitement. She was surrounded by a group of wealthy patrons, her laughter echoing through the ballroom. Yu Yanqing felt a pang of something akin to pity, followed swiftly by a surge of resentment. She uses me, she thought, her jaw tightening. She uses my success, my marriage, to fuel her addiction. The thought of Qiao Qiao, the kidnapper, resurfaced, intertwining with the image of her mother's desperate gambling. A sudden, chilling realization struck her. What if? The question hung in the air, unspoken, yet heavy with implication. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place, revealing a picture far more complex, and far more dangerous, than she had ever imagined. The smile on her face faltered, the mask momentarily slipping, revealing the storm brewing beneath the surface. The game, it seemed, was far from over. The crystal chandeliers cast a kaleidoscope of light across the ballroom, transforming the already opulent space into a glittering spectacle. Yu Yanqing, draped in a sapphire gown that mirrored the deep ocean, felt a chill despite the warmth of the room. The gala, ostensibly for a children's charity, felt more like a stage for political maneuvering, every smile a carefully crafted mask, every conversation a veiled transaction. She'd arrived with Shen Wenxian, his hand possessively at her waist, the picture of a devoted husband. But beneath the surface, a current of tension ran between them, a silent battle waged with smiles and whispers. "You're quiet tonight," Shen Wenxian murmured, his voice low enough for only her to hear. His gaze, however, swept the room, acknowledging nods and greetings with practiced ease. She knew that look. He was assessing the field, calculating the power dynamics, always playing the game. "Just tired," she replied, offering a wan smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Tired of the charade, tired of the constant scrutiny, tired of being a pawn in his game. The kidnapping, though terrifying, had been a strange respite from the suffocating gilded cage of their marriage. He squeezed her waist, a gesture that felt more like a warning than affection. "Try to look a little more engaged. People are watching." A wave of nausea rose in her throat. People are watching. That was the mantra of her life. Every move, every word, every expression scrutinized and dissected. Was it any wonder she sometimes felt like she was losing herself, the line between Yu Yanqing the actress and Yu Yanqing the Secretary-General's wife blurring into oblivion? The melody shifted, the orchestra launching into a waltz. Shen Wenxian, without waiting for a response, led her onto the dance floor. As they moved, she caught sight of a familiar figure near the entrance, her mother. Dressed in a garish red dress, her face plastered with makeup, she stood out like a splash of cheap paint on a priceless canvas. Yu Yanqing's heart plummeted. What was she doing here? Panic tightened its icy grip around her chest. She knew her mother's penchant for gambling, the mounting debts, the increasingly desperate calls for money. Had she come here to make a scene? To expose their secret marriage? Shen Wenxian, ever perceptive, followed her gaze. His expression remained impassive, but she felt the subtle stiffening of his body. "Don't worry," he whispered, his lips barely moving. "I'll handle it." The music swelled, the dancers swirling around them, oblivious to the silent storm brewing beneath the surface. Yu Yanqing felt a strange detachment, as though she were watching a play unfold, the actors moving through their preordained roles. Later, after the dance, Shen Wenxian excused himself, his movements smooth and purposeful as he navigated through the crowd towards her mother. Yu Yanqing watched, her breath catching in her throat, a sense of dread washing over her. She knew, with a chilling certainty, that whatever transpired between them would have far-reaching consequences. She found a secluded balcony, the cool night air a welcome reprieve from the stifling atmosphere of the ballroom. Leaning against the railing, she closed her eyes, trying to block out the images flashing through her mind, her mother's pleading eyes, Shen Wenxian's cold, calculating gaze. "Mr. Shen, the debt my mother owes, please give me some more time," she heard her mother's voice, tinged with desperation. Yu Yanqing opened her eyes, drawn back into the scene unfolding below. She could see them from her vantage point, the stark contrast between her mother's disheveled appearance and Shen Wenxian's impeccable suit, a visual representation of the power imbalance between them. Shen Wenxian's voice, though low, carried a sharp edge. "It's your mother who borrowed the money. Why are you the one who pays back the money?" He tilted his head, a predatory gleam in his eyes. Yu Yanqing's mother's laughter was brittle, laced with a hint of hysteria. "She is my security deposit. She will pay it back." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Yu Yanqing felt a surge of rage, hot and blinding. She was not a commodity to be traded, a debt to be settled. She was a person, with her own desires, her own ambitions, her own life. But in their eyes, she was nothing more than a pawn in a game of power and control. She descended the stairs, her movements deliberate, her gaze fixed on the two figures below. The kidnapping, the gala, her mother's debts, it all seemed to coalesce into a single, suffocating truth. She was trapped, caught in a web of lies and manipulation, with no escape in sight. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, a flicker of something cold and hard sparked in her eyes. She would not be a victim. She would play the game too. The chandelier's crystals refracted the light, scattering 1,000 glittering stars across the ballroom. Yu Yanqing felt a chill despite the warmth radiating from the bodies pressed close around her. Each smile directed at her, each polite inquiry about her recent ordeal, felt like a pinprick, a subtle probing into the carefully constructed facade of her life. Shen Wenxian stood beside her, a pillar of composure, his hand resting lightly on her back, a possessive gesture that felt less like support and more like a brand. "Such a devoted husband," someone murmured nearby, and Yu Yanqing's lips curved into the practiced smile that had become her second skin. Devotion. The word tasted like ash in her mouth. If they only knew. "Secretary General Shen, it's an honor to have you both here tonight," a portly man in a tuxedo boomed, extending a hand. Shen Wenxian's grip was firm, his smile impeccably polite. The small talk washed over Yu Yanqing, a meaningless tide of platitudes and veiled inquiries about her career. She played her part flawlessly, the grateful victim, the resilient actress, her voice a soft counterpoint to Shen Wenxian's deep baritone. Inside, a cold anger simmered. This performance, this charade, was her life. A woman with elaborately coiffed hair and a diamond necklace that could rival a small nation's GDP approached them, her eyes lingering on Yu Yanqing with a mixture of pity and curiosity. "My dear, so glad to see you recovered. Such a terrifying experience. You must be so relieved to have such a strong husband by your side." Yu Yanqing's smile tightened. Strong. Yes, Shen Wenxian was strong. Strong enough to bend her to his will, to mold her into the perfect accessory for his political ambitions. "Yes," she replied, her voice a silken thread, "I am very fortunate." Fortunate to be trapped in a gilded cage, she thought bitterly. Later, as Shen Wenxian was engaged in a conversation with a group of dignitaries, Yu Yanqing found herself momentarily alone. She drifted towards the edge of the ballroom, seeking a brief respite from the suffocating atmosphere. The music, a saccharine waltz, grated on her nerves. She closed her eyes, inhaling deeply, trying to steady the tremor in her hands. The memory of the kidnapping, the claustrophobic darkness, the chilling voice of her captor, still clung to her like a shroud. But it wasn't the fear that haunted her now, it was the unsettling realization that her captor, Xiao Qiao, knew her deepest secrets, her unspoken resentments. "How?" "Yanqing." Her mother's voice, sharp and insistent, cut through her thoughts. Yu Yanqing opened her eyes, her gaze hardening as she saw her mother weaving through the crowd towards her, a predatory gleam in her eyes. The woman's expensive dress and newly styled hair were a stark contrast to the desperation Yu Yanqing knew lurked beneath the surface. "Mother," she acknowledged, her voice cool. "Spent a lot of money, her mother began, her words slurring slightly. The familiar scent of alcohol clung to her. Yu Yanqing's stomach clenched. Another debt. Another demand. The cycle never ended. She is so sensible and filial now, her mother continued, gesturing vaguely towards a group of people Yu Yanqing didn't recognize. I'll leave her with you. And with that, she disappeared back into the throng, leaving Yu Yanqing to deal with the consequences of her addiction. Filial. The word echoed mockingly in Yu Yanqing's ears. Was it filial piety to be a constant source of income for a mother who saw her only as a pawn in her own self-destructive game? Shen Wenxian returned, his expression unreadable. Your mother? He asked, his voice low. Yu Yanqing nodded, her gaze fixed on the swirling patterns of the marble floor. She's gone, she said, her voice flat. She didn't need to explain. He knew. He always knew. He had orchestrated this entire charade, this marriage of convenience, to protect his own image, to silence the whispers about his past. And she had been complicit, playing the role of the devoted wife, the grateful beneficiary of his generosity. Everything all right? He asked, his hand resting on her arm. The touch sent a shiver down her spine. All right? Nothing was all right. Her life was a carefully constructed lie, a performance for the benefit of the world. Yes, she replied, forcing a smile. Everything is fine. Later that evening, as they were leaving the gala, a woman approached Yu Yanqing, her eyes blazing with an unsettling intensity. How dare you, the woman hissed, her voice barely above a whisper. How dare you marry such a man? Yu Yanqing froze, her breath catching in her throat. The woman's words, though spoken softly, resonated with a power that shook her to her core. Who was this woman? What did she know? Shen Wenxian stepped forward, his face hardening. Is there a problem? He asked, his voice laced with steel. The woman flinched, but her gaze remained fixed on Yu Yanqing. You'll regret this, she murmured, before turning and disappearing into the crowd. Yu Yanqing stood there, her heart pounding, the woman's words echoing in her ears. Regret. She already did. She regretted the day she had agreed to this charade, the day she had become Shen Wenxian's wife. She looked at him, at the mask of composure he wore so effortlessly, and a chilling thought crept into her mind. What if the kidnapping, the whispers, the strange encounters, were all part of a larger game? A game she didn't understand, a game she was unknowingly playing a crucial role in. The fear that had clung to her since her abduction shifted, morphing into something colder, sharper, a premonition of a storm gathering on the horizon. The crystal chandeliers of the ballroom cast a fractured light across the polished marble floor, reflecting in the champagne flutes and the glittering jewels adorning the guests. Yu Yanqing, dressed in a crimson gown that clung to her like a second skin, felt the weight of every eye upon her. A faint tremor ran through her, not entirely from the residual fear of her recent ordeal but from the suffocating pressure of this charade. Her smile, practiced and flawless, felt like a brittle mask. He thinks I'm fragile, she mused, the thought a bitter drop in the sweet champagne she sipped. He thinks he's protecting me. Across the room, Shen Wenxian stood amidst a cluster of dignitaries, his posture radiating an effortless authority. His gaze swept across the room, settling on her for a fleeting moment. That look, a blend of concern and possession, ignited a flicker of resentment within her. He was a master of appearances, the Secretary-General, the pillar of stability, the devoted husband. Yet, beneath that carefully constructed facade, she knew the man who held her captive, not with ropes and threats, but with unspoken expectations and the weight of their secret. The air hummed with polite conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the low thrum of music. Director Li, his face flushed from alcohol, approached her, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. Yanqing, you were magnificent today, despite everything. He gestured vaguely, his eyes darting around as if the walls themselves held ears. "Thank you, Director Lee," she replied, her voice even and controlled. He means despite the kidnapping, she thought, despite the carefully orchestrated drama that has propelled me back into the spotlight. She felt a surge of nausea. This entire ordeal felt like a play within a play, and she wasn't sure which role she was meant to perform anymore. "The police still haven't released any details," Director Lee continued, his voice dropping further. "Quite the mystery, isn't it?" "Indeed," she murmured, her eyes meeting his. He suspects something, she realized. He senses the artificiality of it all. The thought sent a chill down her spine. Assistant Wang, Shen Wenxian's ever-present shadow, materialized beside them. "The Secretary General requests your presence, Madam Shen." His tone was impassive, his eyes betraying nothing. Yu Yanqing excused herself from Director Lee, her heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against her ribs. As she walked toward Shen Wenxian, she felt a prickling sensation on the back of her neck, the unsettling feeling of being watched. "The kidnappers are watching us," a voice whispered in her mind. She reached Shen Wenxian's side, slipping her hand into the crook of his arm. The gesture felt alien, a performance for the benefit of their audience. "Everything all right?" he murmured, his voice low and intimate, meant only for her ears. "Yes," she replied, her smile unwavering. "Except for the fact that our marriage is a lie, and I'm trapped in a gilded cage of your making," she added silently. "The police have some leads," he said, his gaze fixed on a group of politicians across the room. "They believe it's a politically motivated attack." "Do you think so?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. He turned to her, his eyes searching hers. "The kidnappers demanded a ransom, but they released you unharmed." "It doesn't make sense." "It makes perfect sense," she thought, if the ransom was just a smokescreen, a way to make it appear legitimate. She knew, with a chilling certainty, that the kidnapping was not a random act of violence but a carefully calculated move. But by whom? And for what purpose? Later, as the gala thinned, Shen Wenxian led her to a secluded balcony overlooking the city lights. The cool night air was a welcome reprieve from the stifling atmosphere of the ballroom. "The Secretary General has checked it. No monitoring equipment," Assistant Wang reported, his voice barely audible. He stood a discreet distance away, a silent sentinel. "The kidnappers probably flew away before we arrived," Shen Wenxian said, his voice laced with a hint of frustration. Yu Yanqing remained silent, gazing at the city lights. "They're not watching us," she realized, "they're listening." Xiao Qiao, her childhood friend, the tech whiz who had always lived on the fringes of society, had a knack for manipulating technology in ways that defied comprehension. She remembered Xiao Qiao's cryptic message, the one she'd received just hours before the kidnapping: "I'm giving you a chance." A chance for what? To escape? Or to play a different role in this elaborate game? "Yanqing, are you listening?" Shen Wenxian's voice broke through her thoughts. "Yes," she replied, turning to him. I still feel uneasy." He reached out, his hand cupping her face. "It's over now. You're safe." She allowed herself to lean into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. Safe? She thought. Safe with the man who controls my every move, who uses me as a pawn in his political games. The image of her mother flashed in her mind, her face etched with desperation, her voice pleading for money to pay off her gambling debts. The debts that Yu Yanqing, bound by a twisted sense of filial duty, had been forced to settle time and time again. Her mother, the actress who had never achieved the fame she craved, had used her daughter as a stepping stone, a bargaining chip. And now, it seemed, history was repeating itself. But this time, the stakes were much higher. The kidnapping, she realized, was a message, a warning. Not to her, but to Shen Wenxian. A warning from someone who knew his secrets, someone who understood the fragile foundation upon which his power rested. And that someone, she suspected, was closer than he could ever imagine. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place, revealing a picture far more complex and dangerous than she had initially anticipated. She was no longer a victim, but a player in a game where the rules were constantly shifting, and the consequences, potentially devastating. The fear, the uncertainty, they were still there, but now, something else began to stir within her, a flicker of resolve, a spark of defiance. The mask she wore began to feel less like a prison and more like a shield, a weapon in a battle that was about to begin. The remnants of the day clung to the city like a damp shroud, the neon signs blurring into the drizzle. Yu Yanqing sat in her opulent living room, the silence a stark contrast to the bustling film set from earlier. She traced the rim of a crystal glass, the ice clinking faintly, a fragile sound in the cavernous space. It was a performance, this quiet contemplation. Every gesture, every flicker of emotion, meticulously crafted. Shen Wenxian wouldn't be home for hours, meetings and appearances keeping him away, allowing her the freedom to dismantle the mask she wore so diligently in his presence. She had played the role of the grateful wife, the rescued damsel, for the cameras, for the public. But the truth was a tangled web of resentment and calculation. The kidnapping, initially a terrifying ordeal, had morphed into something else, something useful. Her phone buzzed, a discreet vibration against the polished wood of the side table. Qiao Qiao. Seeing the name, a cold satisfaction bloomed in her chest. It went as planned, Qiao Qiao's voice, crisp and efficient, sliced through the quiet. Yu Yanqing swirled the amber liquid in her glass, a small smile playing on her lips. Good. And the evidence? She asked, her voice soft, almost a whisper. Delivered. Anonymously, of course. To the right people. Qiao Qiao's tone held a hint of amusement. Yu Yanqing could almost see the flicker of a smirk on her face. They had played this game before, a dangerous dance of manipulation and secrets. This time, the stakes were higher. This time, it wasn't just about money. It was about control. You know, Qiao Qiao, Yu Yanqing began, her voice laced with a strange mixture of affection and malice, you have a real talent for this. The silence on the other end stretched for a beat, then Qiao Qiao's low chuckle echoed in her ear. We all have our gifts, Yanqing. Mine just happens to be a little unconventional. The implication hung in the air, thick and heavy. Unconventional. Yes, kidnapping your supposed best friend was certainly that. But Qiao Qiao wasn't just a friend, she was a tool, a weapon honed to a razor's edge. And Yu Yanqing was a master at wielding such weapons. Luo Hongzhou contacted me, Qiao Qiao said, breaking the silence. The name sent a jolt through Yu Yanqing, a sharp, unpleasant reminder of the complexities of her plan. He suspected something. He's not stupid. Yu Yanqing closed her eyes, the image of Luo Hongzhou's face flashing behind her eyelids, a mixture of ambition and desperation in his eyes. He won't say anything, she stated, more to herself than to Qiao Qiao. He has too much to lose. The charity gala shimmered with a superficial brilliance. Crystal chandeliers cast a dazzling light on the assembled elite, their laughter echoing hollowly in the vast ballroom. Shen Wenxian moved through the crowd with practiced ease, his smile fixed, his hand firm on Yu Yanqing's arm. He exuded power, control, an aura of invincibility. But beneath the polished veneer, a current of unease ran through him. The kidnapping had shaken him, not for Yu Yanqing's safety, but for the potential damage to his carefully constructed image. He glanced at his wife, her expression serene, almost detached. He couldn't decipher the thoughts behind those cool, dark eyes. He never could. Their marriage was a carefully negotiated contract, a union of convenience, not love. He had offered her security, a gilded cage, and she had accepted, playing the role of the devoted wife with chilling precision. He felt a tap on his shoulder, turning to see a man with a bland face and sharp eyes. Assistant Wang. Secretary General, Wang murmured, leaning in close, his voice barely audible above the music. We have a problem. The information has been leaked. Shen Wenxian felt a muscle twitch in his jaw. He had underestimated his rivals. They were more cunning, more ruthless than he had anticipated. Details, he commanded, his voice tight. Wang hesitated, glancing at Yu Yanqing. It's about Madame Yu's mother, he whispered finally. Shen Wenxian's gaze hardened. He knew of her mother, the actress with a penchant for gambling and a mountain of debt. A liability. He had paid off her debts once, a hefty price for his wife's compliance. What about her? He asked, his voice dangerously low. The information suggests she was coerced. Blackmailed into facilitating the kidnapping. The word struck him like a physical blow. He looked at Yu Yanqing, her expression unchanged, a perfect mask of innocence. But now, he saw a flicker of something else in her eyes. Triumph. He felt a cold dread seep into his bones. Later, in the privacy of their limousine, the silence between them crackled with unspoken accusations. Shen Wenxian stared out the window, the city lights blurring into a meaningless stream of color. Your mother, he finally said, his voice devoid of emotion. Yu Yanqing met his gaze, her own eyes cold and steady. She has a weakness for gambling, she replied, her tone casual, almost flippant. And powerful enemies, Shen Wenxian added, his voice edged with steel. He turned to face her fully. You knew, didn't you? She didn't answer, her silence a confirmation. You used this situation to your advantage, he continued, his voice rising. To manipulate me, to control the narrative. Yu Yanqing tilted her head, a small, mocking smile playing on her lips. You think you control everything, Shen Wenxian, she said softly. But you don't control me. He stared at her, a mixture of anger and fascination in his eyes. Who orchestrated it, Yanqing? He asked, his voice low and dangerous. Your junior, also your current partner Luo Hongzhou. Her voice was a whisper, a venomous caress in the confines of the car. His carefully constructed world began to crumble around him. He leaned back against the plush leather seat, his mind racing. He had been so focused on external threats that he had overlooked the enemy within. He had underestimated his wife. He had thought he had bought her loyalty, her silence. He had been wrong. My wife is not a doll I bought home, he started, his voice strained, the carefully maintained composure cracking. But I greedily want the woman who stays by my side. The words hung in the air, a confession, a plea. Yu Yanqing watched him, her eyes unreadable. He had shown her a flicker of vulnerability, a chink in his armor. And she knew, with a chilling certainty, that she had won. The film set buzzed, a hive of controlled chaos. Yu Yanqing stood apart, the script clutched in her hand, the words blurring into a meaningless jumble. The director's booming voice, usually a source of irritation, faded into the background hum. Her mind was elsewhere, replaying the events of the past few days, the chilling confinement, the gnawing fear, and then, the unexpected revelation of Qiao Qiao's identity. Her childhood friend, her confidant, the keeper of all her secrets, the architect of her ordeal. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than any knife. Why, Qiao Qiao? The question echoed in the hollow spaces of her heart. Was it envy? A twisted sense of loyalty to her mother? Or something else entirely, something she couldn't yet grasp? Yanqing, are you ready? Director Li's voice sliced through her thoughts. She plastered a smile on her face, the practiced mask of an actress concealing the turmoil within. Ready as I'll ever be, director. The words felt hollow, even to her own ears. The scene called for her to portray a woman betrayed, a cruel irony that twisted her insides. Each line, each gesture, felt like a reenactment of her own life, blurring the lines between performance and reality. Later that evening, the opulent ballroom shimmered with the glitter of 1,000 diamonds. The charity gala, a stage for the city's elite, felt suffocating. Shen Wenxian stood beside her, his hand resting possessively on her waist. The perfect picture of a power couple. But beneath the surface, the currents of their relationship swirled, turbulent and unpredictable. He still didn't know the full truth. He thought it was a simple kidnapping, a random act of violence. He didn't know about his rivals, about their intricate plot, or about Xiao Qiao's involvement. Most importantly, he didn't know about her mother's spiraling debts, the crushing weight of which had driven Xiao Qiao to such desperate measures. "You seem distant," Shen Wenxian murmured, his voice low and close to her ear. His breath, warm against her skin, sent a shiver down her spine. A shiver not of desire, but of unease. She forced a smile, tilting her head to meet his gaze. "Just tired, Wenxian. The filming was demanding today." The lie slipped out easily, a practiced maneuver in their carefully constructed dance of deception. He nodded, seemingly satisfied, but a flicker of something unreadable crossed his eyes. He was a master of control, used to orchestrating every aspect of his life, including their marriage. He'd built walls around them both, walls of secrecy and propriety, walls that now felt like a prison. She'd played her part willingly, seduced by the allure of stability and the illusion of love. But the kidnapping had shattered that illusion, leaving her raw and exposed. Days turned into weeks. The city buzzed with speculation about the kidnapping, the whispers weaving a tapestry of half-truths and outright lies. Shen Wenxian, ever the strategist, managed to control the narrative, deflecting suspicion and maintaining his impeccable public image. He even offered her a way out, a quiet divorce, a clean break. It would be for the best, he'd said, his voice devoid of emotion. "This incident has put us both in a precarious position." It was a logical solution, a pragmatic approach to damage control. But something within her rebelled. "I don't want a divorce." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. Perhaps he'd expected relief, gratitude even. But what he saw in her eyes was defiance, a flicker of the fire he'd tried so hard to extinguish. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. The clock on the mantelpiece ticked, each second a hammer blow against the fragile facade of their marriage. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and laced with a hint of something she couldn't quite decipher. "Why, Yenxing? Why stay?" She took a deep breath, the air catching in her throat. "During these more than 1,000 days together he has already lived in my heart." The words weren't entirely true, not in the way he might interpret them. It wasn't love that bound her to him, not anymore. It was something more complex, a tangled web of resentment, dependence, and a strange, twisted sense of loyalty. He was the architect of her gilded cage, but he was also the only one who truly understood the rules of the game they played. He studied her, his gaze intense, searching. He was a man accustomed to reading people, to dissecting their motives, to anticipating their every move. But for the first time, she saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, a crack in the impenetrable armor he wore so well. In the weeks that followed, their relationship shifted, subtly but undeniably. The carefully constructed walls began to crumble, replaced by a fragile, tentative bridge. They talked, not about love, but about the realities of their situation, the compromises they'd both made, the secrets they'd both kept. He learned about her mother's crippling debts, about the pressure she'd been under, about the desperation that had driven Xiao Qiao to such extreme measures. He didn't condone what Xiao Qiao had done, but he understood. He saw the intricate web of cause and effect, the way their carefully constructed world had inadvertently created the conditions for its own near destruction. He saw, perhaps for the first time, the woman behind the mask, the vulnerability she'd hidden so well. And she, in turn, saw a glimpse of the man beneath the facade of power and control. She saw the burden he carried, the weight of responsibility, the loneliness that came with wielding such immense influence. She saw, not the monster she'd often painted him to be, but a flawed, complex individual, trapped in his own carefully constructed prison. Their future remained uncertain, a path shrouded in mist. The damage had been done, the trust fractured. But amidst the ruins of their old life, something new began to emerge, a fragile seed of understanding, a hesitant step towards a different kind of connection. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was a start. A possibility. A chance to rebuild, not the fairy tale they'd pretended to live, but something real, something raw, something honest. The silence between them was no longer suffocating, but pregnant with unspoken possibilities. The game had changed, the rules rewritten. And for the first time, Yu Yenxing felt a flicker of hope, a fragile ember glowing in the darkness.